And so which if, and we have done an override, but it's been some time since we have, and we're always very hesitant to even ask voters to consider it because we know our taxes are already high. But if there's a need to have a budget that is calling for increase in a year greater than 2.5%, we can ask the voters to consider doing that. And that once an override is passed, it actually increases the budget and then it doesn't go away. That 2.5% increase is actually a permanent increase. There's another provision within that same law that was passed in 1980 that says that if you have a particular need to do something and like building a building, you can go for what's called a debt exclusion vote. And the term has to do with saying that you're going to exclude that particular debt from the normal budget process and treat it separately. And the debt exclusion also raises the taxes to pay for that particular project over the period that you have borrowed the money. But once the money is paid back to build the building, then that increase goes away. And that's what the debt exclusion was. Lynn, you're muted.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about the capital projects at this time? Okay, then, yes, go ahead. Please unmute.
Yeah, I was wondering if, I don't know if now or in another part you would be talking about the rotaries that we've been building on Heatherstone.
They're awful.
Oh,
Please, just this mama with a big car is just wanting to ask a lot of questions about that.
I can say a little bit because I'm as by the way, I'm a counselor at large, which means that you voted for me in the last election along with all of the other districts. And I'm chair of the Town Services and Outreach Committee, and this is a topic that we talk about. There is a plan, and we'd always said that we were going to do those rotaries as an experiment. The reason that it was done was to try and make sure that when we smoothed out that road, both by removing that center that was in the most northern section closest to Main Street, and then going south, that it would pick up speed and people would drive faster. In the purpose of the mini roundabouts was to keep people from speeding. There were disadvantages to it too. We recognized that there is a plan that in May is the target month that we are going to hold a community meeting, probably by Zoom and maybe in person, we don't know. And we want to try and get input on whether that experiment of those mini roundabouts has worked. And at that point, we would consider whether to keep them or have them removed. But that's a process that is several months away yet before we do that assessment. We wanted it to be in place long enough that people could experience it and offer input.
Rich, you had your hand up. Rich McLean.
I can wait for that meeting in May.
Okay. All right. Jason, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you again. I've heard numerous times about these roundabouts that were they were put in as an experiment and we're trying to see if they're working or not, but I have yet to have anyone define what is success and what is not success with these roundabouts. How are we knowing? And on a side note, they're far too big and intrusive to allow emergency vehicles to go around them. So I heard so many people say, we can't put speed tables in and we can't put speed bumps in because emergency vehicles can't go over them, but we just put speed bumps in. They are effectively speed bumps for emergency vehicles. So,
And
is there any conversation or any thought about putting?
initially, Jason, what we learned, what Guilford Mooring talked about was for them, for large trucks and fire equipment, it's, fire trucks, et cetera, and large delivery trucks, they were supposed to be low enough so that the truck could ride on part of it and it would be all right. I'm not sure that's working. To me, success would be traffic is not speeding through, but and there's a sense when I drive that road, because I live near there, it's obvious, it makes me incredibly uncomfortable because a lot of them are pushed to the side closer to the corner, and it becomes very hard to maneuver around it. And particularly if there are pedestrians, and that's a lovely area to be walking. There's always folks there. And when pedestrians are there, it becomes even more difficult, even if it's an emotional difficulty to navigate it. So I don't know. So Angelica, you have your hand up, but could we go to Tom
Actually, I was
first?
going to go to Tom first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Tom Warger. I live on Alpine Drive, and I had spoken up against the rotaries when the questions were being asked about them. But now that they're in, I actually like them very much. First of all, they are not a problem for emergency or other trucks. I know that because our neighbors have had several ambulance calls in the last couple of weeks. School buses go up and down the street. And most importantly for me, UPS and Amazon, they definitely have no trouble coming in and out. When I make the left turn from Heatherstone into Alpine Drive, I have to slow down. I have to slow down to make that turn, but it's not a problem. Also, if you walk on Heatherstone and you watch somebody driving down the street, you'll see that they do hit their brakes usually before they get to the roundabout. So, the folks on Heatherstone complained for years that the street was so dangerous, and there's never been an accident on Heatherstone. Now we have some traffic calming. Let's see what people feel about it now.
Thank you, Tom.
Angelica?
I think it's related to Tom's comment, and I'm wondering if when we're trying to determine if the experiment work, how we're going to be gathering information, and if you could explain more about that. And I'm trying to think about all the people that are the affected interest of this. And for me, it's not just the emergency vehicles, but also I'd love to get input from the schools and the school bus drivers, because one big concern, and again, it's anecdotal from hearing from my kiddos, you just saw peek in, but the school bus drivers have noted over and over just how challenging the rotaries have been. So that's one issue. It's like, how can we gather for those that may not be District 2 residents, but are dealing with that as a labor every day. And then number 2 is how to mitigate things like snow. So one of the things I've noticed is that this year we had so much snow, and it made it really difficult to see those rotaries. It made it really challenging, and constantly there's work that needs to be done to put a little cone that also gets covered. So it's a real challenge with, with the snow to even see those. So I do worry, and I wonder how we could figure out if it's posing any hazards during specific different times of the year, because of snow that may be covering the circumference and doesn't allow you to see, or areas where it becomes difficult to take a 45-degree turn if you have a van or a vehicle like that. And people, I've noticed, are now having to go straight through to turn into roads like Albinwood. Like I live on Hickory Lane, but when you try to turn into Auburnwood, it becomes really hard from the second rotary, because there's just not enough space there to take that left turn. We'll see how spring does, you know, as part of observing this.
I also want to just mention that I've had numerous people send me pictures and emails, and upon invitation, although I don't need an invitation, but I took one twice. I came over and observed it during school traffic and watched the school buses have to go up one road, turn around, and then come back down because they couldn't go around the rotary.
Right.
So, yeah. Are there any other questions on this? And I see one more hand. Liz Haygood, please. Come on in. There you are. Please unmute.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Hi. I do appreciate Mr. Varga's comments, Tom, if you will, about liking the rotaries. And I don't live on Heatherstone, and I am one of those folks that when Route 9 is a danger to me, I live on Logtown. I do cut into Heatherstone and, you know, Gatehouse to Heatherstone and down Main Street when I have to get into town. I just want to point out that as a consideration for the emergency vehicles and the school buses and everything, they do have to navigate our apartment complexes, because Rolling Green has speed humps, and so does Colonial and Puffton Village and Village Park. So if when you're considering that, please keep that in mind, that the apartment complexes have a lot of traffic when it comes to our emergency vehicles and our school buses as well. And they've been able to navigate the speed humps going into our apartment complexes. So that's all. Thank you.
Pippa, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Just real quick. I live on Heatherstone, and I want to say that the roundabouts have been very effective for the purpose for which they were designed, which is to slow traffic. There's no doubt that the traffic is slower, and I understand there's all these other concerns, but that was the purpose for them, and they are being effective in that way. That's all. Thank you.
Andy.
Yeah, I just, as Pat said earlier, that was the purpose of the roundabouts, was to slow traffic. The alternative would have been to do speed humps, as has been done on some other town streets. Lincoln Avenue is one, Cottage Street is another. And they, you know, that could have been the alternative. Guilford Mooring, the superintendent of public works, was very anxious to try this approach as a different way of doing it. I do think that there's no higher than the speed humps are, but we didn't know what it was going to be like in the winter time, which is why we decided that it would take a full year to really get an assessment of it, or at least get through a winter season. And that's the question. And the intention of the committee in when we do that forum is also to seek input, not just from school bus drivers, but PVTA also, because there's a PVTA route that goes through there, and USA Trucking and some of the major haulers that you've mentioned, like you know, FedEx and UPS. So we'll try and have a forum, get as much input from as many people as possible, and who use the street and rely on the street, consult our fire department as to how they have felt about it and how it compares for the difficulties of Lincoln and Cottage Street where we use speed humps, and then move it along to make a decision on what to do.
Rebecca, I brought you into the room and you had your hand up, so please go ahead.
I'm going to wait till May. Decided to bite my tongue. Thank you.
All right. Pippa, you still have your hand up, Pippa. Okay. And Rich, you have your hand up.
Sorry, we discussed it enough that I thought I would just add my thought. I advocated for the mini roundabouts. I'm still overall glad that they're there, but I think it should be acknowledged that their installation was bungled, and then the attempts to come back and I guess fix the things that went wrong when they were first installed were really disappointing. And so I, as somebody who was really excited about them, I was really disappointed to see how they were ultimately executed.
Okay. So as Andy said, there'll be some kind of public meeting in May. And I know that he's already pledged to include Pat and I in that, even though we're not on TSO, but it is our district. And I have to say, it's certainly something we've heard a lot about. If there's no other questions, we are going to go and move on to the budget. And I want to take this on in two different ways, or a couple different ways. First of all, we have some very good news to share with you, and that is that today the town manager did announce to the finance committee, and therefore it is public, that we are going to be able to go up to a 4% increase for all of the levels of town, which is, if you might recall, we started at 3% back in November. And sometime in January, we got to 3.5, and we are now at 4.0. So that does help. It doesn't solve everything, but it helps. John, you had your hand up. Please unmute. Can't hear you.
You're muted, John.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I had my hand up. I did want to mention something about the roundabouts and also a similar problem, which is a traffic calming measure that you didn't anticipate, and that is the proliferation of potholes and deplaning of neighborhood roads in Echo Hill. I want to thank the three of you for voting for the added $500,000 and then the $500,000 that didn't pass for road renovations. We've gone from having a $29 million deficit in road reconstruction and road repair to a $49 million deficit. That's the wrong way. And I would like to see us commit to making some improvements in the roads. Gatehouse Road is becoming extremely dangerous as people who are going up the hill are using the left side of the road because the right side of the road is impassable. The DPW every year spends probably 4 or 5 mornings patching and trying to make fixes to Gatehouse Road, and you just can't keep patching and patching and patching. So I hope that as neighbors, that the three of you will advocate for Gatehouse Road to be fixed, not patched, this year. Thank you.
I did, by the way, ask the town manager if we have the most recent list for this coming spring, and I haven't received it yet. So either we don't have it or he didn't get to that email. Liz, you have your hand up.
Yes. Part of the issue with, I noticed Gatehouse Road and some of the other roads that have the destruction of our roads, Mr. Height, if you look at the side where it is, it's because when you have the trees that hang over, and the dew stops from the trees and then it trickles down, it deteriorates the roads. So part of the issue is if you cut the leaves, the branches back on the trees that are going over the roads and then fix the road, it alleviate a lot of the problem.
I will just say, I can't even make any excuses for Amherst roads. They are without question. My husband and I have been to the interior of Russia. The roads were better in the
Route 9
interior of
gives me an
Russia
ulcer.
than they are
Route
here.
9, College
Mhm.
Street gives me an ulcer, especially when I go into the center of town. I paid my excise tax and came home and no.
Jason, on this issue, and then we're going to go to the budget.
Yeah, sorry, when you mentioned that all levels of town up to 4.0, can you explain what that means?
Yes. First of all, Andy just explained earlier, generally, we can only do a 2.5% or 2.5% increase. So any increase that we have in our budget comes from essentially new growth. It certainly is not coming from the state. They're bleeding us dry. And so by squeezing here, squeezing there, doing tighter estimates, we've now gotten from 2.5% to 4% increase on next year's budget.
Based on potentially cuts to services?
No, actually, well, there will be some cuts to services, but it's still, Amherst basically can only generate about 3.5%, if we're lucky, 4% based on new growth every year. And that is, about as far as we can go. And yet we are restricted by 2.5% to only be 2.5%. So anytime we can come above 2.5%, we've made progress because we've had new growth. Now, I have to be honest and say some people in town don't like that new growth because it's those, quote, high-rise apartment buildings downtown or on University Drive or someplace else. But those apartment buildings are, in fact, the new growth in Amherst.
So that 4.0
Mhm.
is coming from a combination of new growth this year or cuts?
No, it's coming from a combination of new growth and a 2.5% increase,
Okay.
which is the standard. Now, then the question is, what does the budget look like when people have to live within that? Okay.
Mhm.
And that we don't have the town manager's budget yet. We'll get the regional school budget sometime in March. And then we get the town manager's budget, which includes the elementary schools, the library, and the town on May 1st. And that's when we'll see where the cuts really are. Lee, I believe you had your hand up first.
And maybe you'll talk about this with the budget, but I'm really glad to have the issue of new growth as a contribution to the budget making process in the town of Amherst on the table. And I'm wondering if there are plans town-wide to continue to have discussions about new growth, how it might happen, what it might mean, what might happen if we don't have new growth, etc.
There's a couple different studies going on right now. One is the downtown design that's going on, and that actually looks at new growth. And then the housing study that's going on also looks at need for housing. Neither one of them is in final form yet. So how that looks based on those studies, we don't know yet. But those are two contributing factors. Pat?
I was just going to say the proposed university overlay, which would allow for mixed-use buildings, would bring in both commercial and housing. And I think that's something that we really need to consider. And that's an area that's particularly accessible by students as well as other residents in town.
Thank you.
Rich, you have your hand up.
Yeah, could you please discuss why it's a 4% across the board increase and not a flexible amount of budget
Yeah.
change for the year?
There's history to that, but it's not just history. Just as each unit of government, if you will, has their budget pressures, whether it be contract negotiations, increase in fuel, increase in cost of vehicles. I mean, today we just heard that with the new tariffs, vehicles may go up another 4,000, and that's just a car. So these things are not cheap, and each of the three groups of government, the schools and the town itself and the library, each have these kinds of pressures. The cost of heating is another example. The big budget breaker this year for all of us was healthcare. And we started out with an almost 20%, and we've gotten it down below 16. And that's because our group that looks at it, which includes membership across all of our unions, made some concessions on what their benefits would look like. 4% decrease in that was huge this year. So there's a lot of moving parts to budgets, and people think, oh, it's like just this or it's that. It's not. It's everything. It's fuel. It's maintenance. It's
Salaries, staff.
salaries. It just goes on, and every unit of government has them. Kitty?
I'm sorry, I don't feel that you necessarily addressed why it's a static bump to every part of government. Yes, I understand that budgets are stressful and there are unforeseen expenses this year, but why does it have to be everybody gets 3.5%, everybody gets 4%?
One of the
Is it
things
not
that
more flexible in meeting places where, there are stressors for all of the departments, but maybe some places in town government have crises going on.
I think every place right now in our town has got some crisis going on in terms of staffing and maintenance of buildings and facilities. Absolutely. And, one of the things that I grew up in a very working class family, and in Trenton, New Jersey. And that's significant because working class people are often treated differently. They're seen as less successful. There's lots of reasons that they don't always get their fair share of things. So from that little kid in me, that working class kid, I look at everybody saying, oh, well, we need to increase this because this is a crisis. But then we look at the DPW and I see men and women who are working to keep the sewers clean, to plow the snow, to do all the kind of dirty work we have in our town. And just like any other person who works in town, they need increases in their salaries. They need more staffing. And they need their buildings repaired, but the focus often becomes, and I'll say this, in the schools. And the schools are incredibly important in any town. But it does seem to me that the level funding across departments sort of is a way of saying there's got to be some equity for all of the workers in town. Because there is not one department in town that isn't struggling with having a lack of staffing, the amount of staffing that they need. So and I was an educator. I was an elementary school teacher and a mathematics coach. So for me, schools are incredibly important. But I also feel this need to balance. So for me, that seems to me to be important, that level, that across the board. And then how do we make things work? So that's my personal opinion. I don't know where Lynn or Andy or anybody else would be.
I don't know that I have any better answers to this. I'm gonna go on to Kitty.
Okay, so regarding new growth and the whole topic of encouraging workforce and family housing and, finessing, like dealing with the delicate balance between student housing and family housing, and workforce housing. I'm wondering if you could possibly give a meaningful comment, to the question of the Kittredge development non-proposal. Of having 240, 200 and I forget how many, 200 something residential units in the town of, just over the border from Leverett in the town of Amherst, and then 48 or so in the town of Leverett.
All I know about this is that the town of Leverett has come to talk to the town manager and his staff. They cannot proceed with that project unless they link into our sewer and water. And that is not a small charge. And in fact, we are looking now, based on the goals that we have set for the town manager, that when a new entity, if you will, comes in and wants to link up, it's not just at the price of them laying the pipes. It's not just at the price of them paying for the, per whatever cubic feet or whatever it is that they measure. They have to pay something to become part of the club. And you have to be careful how you word that so it's not illegal. But we maintain very, very sophisticated water and sewer systems. We built them, and you have to pay something to join into them, because otherwise we can't maintain them.
So
stay tuned for that one.
So are you saying that the town of Amherst is very, very cautious about participating in this?
We won't proceed unless Leverett wants to proceed. If somebody in Leverett decides to do something different, then Leverett may not have a choice. And the reason they may not have a choice is because they have not met their income, their affordable housing mark. We've just seen a beautiful building that's about ready to be opened in Pelham, which brings Pelham up to their 10%. Leverett doesn't have anything like that. So they actually are subject to a 40R.
But would the income from the new units be counterbalance in some way the sewer?
It depends where they're built, and it depends on whether the project even goes forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And we're having the same conversations with Hadley, who wants to link into our sewer system and water system. So same question. We own the facility. It's not at a small charge.
And I always have heard that, oh no, Amherst has plenty of water. And then Guilford Mooring said earlier, I forget what it was relevant to, but that we don't have that much water.
Well, one of the things that we recently did was reinvest in the building of the replacement plant up in Pelham. And the reason for doing that was so that we maintain the sufficient water level that we have. So, Angelica?
Yeah, I just wanted to return back to Pat's comment and say, first, thank you for your solidarity with working class people in this town. I think now it's needed more urgently than ever with everything that we're seeing and how much people are being affected by the actions of the federal government. And as, a first generation, a person that came as a refugee to this country and first generation to do many things in my family, your comment really resonated with me. So I really appreciate that. And I just want to know more about if you could explain, because I'm not as aware of what are the different crises, and so that we could understand how each area is impacted by a crisis. You mentioned something about salaries and DPW, or can you tell us more about how each area is facing these different crises?
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
No, I was going to say, do you want to start or what?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, when I said salaries, that's some ways that things are increased, but really what I'm talking about is staffing. every department in town is understaffed. And that has a lot to do with budget, where we are financially as a town. Every department has infrastructure needs. If you go to, it would be worth, Angelica, to take a tour of the current DPW building, and you can see what the men and women there have been working in. And so, and the new water treatment plant, that's something that's keeping our water healthy. And the roof is starting to leak there. So that has to be repaired. But instead, right now, in that building and in some in the schools too. So that's why I'm saying it's across the board. There's an umbrella-like thing that has a tube in it that's, put up there under the leak. And then
You're
it
talking
drips
about the
down
new-
and the workers have to come and empty the buckets.
You're working,
So, I may be rambling.
you
but
may be talking about the present DPW, not the new water facility.
I'm talking about the, where was it that we visited? I'm old, I'm sorry.
The present DPW.
Yeah, no, I'm not. The current DPW building is a disaster. It is leaking everywhere. We need to keep putting money in it. No, there's the water treatment plant that we all visited. And that is leaking, and there's infrastructure and equipment issues there. So in every department, in a school, we're looking at books and supplies and paraprofessionals and people who are working directly with children, which is critically important. It's also critically important that we have men and women working in other areas in town, in the Musanti Health Center. So it's not that the DPW is going to get this big salary and teachers are not. We're trying to level what we can do as a town for each department. And the budget isn't final. Lots of things can happen. So, but I don't know. I'm not being very clear, I don't think.
I think that if we're talking also, I mean, the question was about why each of the major sections of the budget, the town departments, regional schools, the elementary schools, and the library go up the same amount each year. And historically, that goes back to town meeting days. And there was a feeling that rather than having each of those that develop their budgets independently and then present them, which is still what happens, and then fight it out on town meeting floor as to who would get the higher budget increase. The conclusion was at that time of town meeting that it was important not to have that happen, and to and to just say, develop a budgeted and even amount across all of the four sections, the four major sections that I described. And we did that, and we did that for quite a number of years. As we've changed forms of government, we've continued to do that because we still have four different budgets being developed, and it's easier and it seems more fair to just say that develop a budget at X% increase, and then let each of them develop budgets and not have battles at a later date that this one is more needy than the other, because every department has the same problems. We all have the health insurance going up. We all are understaffed. All of the department, all of those sections provide important services, and it's the conclusion that keeps coming back, that rather than having a battle of who's more important than another section, that it just be done in a fair and open basis and allow time to develop those budgets.
Angelica?
Oh, I couldn't agree more that I think things should not be pitted against each other. And I just wanted to clarify again what the crisis was. Excuse me. I'm not understanding if it's the building or the people, the staffing.
Are you okay, Angela? Okay. Let me take a stab at it, okay? Let me just give you an example. When we go out to hire for DPW, we are in many cases competing against the private sector for specialists in various areas, engineers, water people, even our sewer people. In addition to that, frankly, we're competing against other municipalities, and we often lose our staff to other municipalities. So we're constantly working. That's just an example. Another example, we are generally searching for firefighters every day. We're often down by as many as 4. And in the police department, we have some similar problems. And unfortunately, with the police department, we do a great job of recruiting. Everybody appreciates that, and they steal our people as fast as they can. And the state police are one of the biggest groups to lure people away. And they leave because the state police can offer them more solid, regular hours, better pay, etc. And so we're just competing against others for the same people. And this is not a small problem in municipal government. It's a problem all over the place. And the schools are the same way. I know earlier we had one of the people on here who I remember coming to the town council and talking about how it took until November or October to recruit another 2nd grade teacher. The issue wasn't that the money wasn't there. The money in this case was there. It's whether or not you can find a 2nd grade teacher. So you've got problems like that. And then you have your repair problems. I mean, people could not believe when we came in, when the proposal came in for the senior center, for Bank Center at 2.8 million, and they saw just how little that buys, it's astounding. But yet, if we don't do that, then the next phase of any renovation for that building can't happen. And so these are complicated issues that keep requiring people to understand all the moving parts of government. It's not just labor, it's facilities, it's the price of fuel, it's the price of insurance, it's all these different pieces. Jason.
Thank you. Something that's come up a few times tonight, and I think is constantly coming up, is just this kind of lack of new growth, and how do we overcome it? You know, there's a lot of conversation right now with the schools and proposed cuts to the schools, and we're talking now about a budget and how, you know, there's this 4%, how everybody's in crisis. So what is the plan, or what are you all doing as a town council to try to, one, potentially change zoning so we can build more homes? So then as the more homes we build, the more affordable all of the homes in the town become. What are you doing to move students out of family housing and back onto the campuses where they're reaping all the benefits of having those students come in? They get all the money. Apparently it's like pulling teeth to get the university and Amherst College to provide money and funding or property to the town to alleviate some of these issues. Why don't we have student rental permits? And why do we allow student rentals in these residential areas? Because that drives prices through the roof.
Before either one of us try to answer that, Liz, you were shaking your head, and I wondered what you were thinking, and get us.
Well, I'm thinking that Jason, Mr. Gurney, I can't call you Jason because I don't know you. Hi, I'm Liz.
All right, you can call me Jason.
As a retired teacher, as someone who has 2 sons who were born here, raised here, volunteer here, raising their children here and work in the schools, how difficult it is to hire and maintain folks. And when it comes to the housing crisis, where I, as a retired mother, have to sometimes support and help my two grown sons with their electricity bill because they can't afford to live in the apartment complexes because the rents are too high. Well, the rents are too high because Massachusetts does not have a rental cap. Now, there's a percentage that the landlords can't go above each year, but they can hit that cap every year, right? That percentage every year. And also the fact that I live across the street from and next door to student housing, and student housing on my residential street. If you look at my street, you know, if you want to know what's the deal with student housing, just come on to Second Logtown and come up to my driveway and I'll point it all out to you. And it's because people are buying the properties. I used to have a young man who graduated with my son in 2004. Him and his wife and his young daughter lived next door to me when they decided to move into Hadley because they want a bigger backyard for their daughter and their now son. So they moved to Hadley, and the person who bought the house, instead of having a family in there, now has 5 or 6 extra cars in the driveway with a bunch of students. Now, the students on my street are no problem to me. They're quiet. They come in, they do their work, and they leave. So I don't have the noise and all of that. However, there's every other house on my street is for students instead of families, which were there when I first moved into the house from Rolling Green in 2010. So it's because the people that are buying the properties are not buying the properties for families, they're buying properties for students. Now, some of that's been alleviated by some of the housing that's gone up at UMass, but the rents over there are crazy. $3,000 a month for what?
Right.
So they would rather come and staff 8 students in their 5-bedroom house across the street from me and make money off of that because the students don't want to live for $3,000 a month. The other part is
They can't afford it.
for me personally, I find the beauty in this town. I come from the projects of Cambridge, Mass. And I found the beauty of this town when I came to UMass in 1977. Well, and I take ownership and pride in this town. So I do what I can to make it better. But the students, they come in, they go to school, they leave. So they don't care what's going on in this town. So there's so many different angles to some of the problems that I think that Pat and Andy and Lynn and all the other counselors and members of some of the subcommittees, I'm on the Human Rights Commission. We're facing things every day. And until we get people to understand the beauty of our town and get to invest in the beauty of our town, some of these issues are going to continue to arise. Now, on top of that, we are in a situation, we don't even know what's coming down. I think Miss Angelica said it. We have no idea what the effect of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. is going to have on our town from 1 minute to the next. So we all have to also be prepared for that. So there's just a lot of moving pieces that all of us need to band together and navigate.
Thank you, Liz. And Jason, I want to say that your question about zoning is a really important question. There have been several zoning changes. We passed an accessory dwelling unit bylaw here in Amherst and made zoning changes to do that. The state now, recognizing the housing crisis, has expanded that, and it is going to, a lot of the ways that we were limiting ADUs is going to be bypassed. Another counselor and I, Amanda Jo Haneke, who's an at-large counselor, worked for a couple of years trying to make zoning changes that would make the building of owner-occupied duplexes as easy as building a single-family home. And, you know, we got shot down by the planning board. We got, you know, and a lot of people in town because, well, I won't go into all those things, but that, one of the things that's happening is an affordable development that Valley Community CDC is building in Ball Lane in North Amherst. And it's going to be duplexes, and the duplexes are going to be varied in size. So they'll be for low and middle income families. And they will be, it's amazing to see the kind of variety that there has been in the drawings. When we tried to propose that, we run against limits on the planning board, people who are very resistant to change. And we have to look at our community who doesn't want change. We don't want to spoil the character of our town. But Liz is really talking about the character of our town. And the one place, Liz, I'll say, I volunteer at the Survival Center, which is an incredibly important organization to me. And there are numbers of student undergraduates and graduates from UMass and students from Amherst College who are volunteering there on a regular basis. There are students who do see the beauty of our town, even if they're only here for 4 years or 6 years. The other, I'm talking too much. I should. So, Jason, one of the things to look at is start going to planning board meetings and start talking about the zoning changes you're talking about. When the ADU thing went through, or I'm not going to, no, that's not quite correct, but there was, they started talking about, well, maybe we could expand the dimensions of the property needed. So there's resistance right there, not on everybody in the planning board, but that resistance is present there and in our community.
Yeah,
So go to those meetings.
I want to mention two things.
Yeah, I want to hear what
Pat-
Jason was just going to
Pat
say
has-
first.
Fine.
I thought you were just going to respond quickly.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned one of the biggest problems is that there's a lot of people that are in positions to make decisions that don't want to see any change happen. And those people are not, in my opinion, representative of the town as a whole. You don't see very many people with children on these boards. I myself am on the Conservation Commission. So the Ball Lane project came through the Conservation Commission. Tremendous waste of space.
Yeah, because they limited it.
You have acres up there and they're building 32 units.
Because that was the only way they could get it through.
Through what?
Through planning board and stuff. That and the ZBA. It was the only way. They had to reduce the number of sites. Now the cost is probably prohibitive, but they had hoped to do, I think, up to 60. So, you know, 30 duplexes. So that was almost cut in half.
My question, my overarching question here is, as the town council, are you in some ways limited to what you can do with zoning? Is it the zoning board that makes our zoning laws?
They make the proposals, they vote, we vote on zoning laws.
Right.
Right. Yeah, everything like that comes back to us. But as I said, when some counselors go forward to talk about real potential zoning changes that would have made a lot of things more accessible if the planning board kiboshes that, then that makes other counselors. We're not a unified body. We're 13 individuals, and some of us are holding certain things precious and other things. I'm holding my stuff precious. You know, it's a fault we all have. So it is not simple. But we are responsible for the zoning in this town. But to get real change, you have to change the hearts and minds of community members and council members. So we're not, that's not a great answer. And
I want to mention two things. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Lenny.
University Drive is coming up for a rezoning. It has already gone through planning board and Community Resources Committee. It comes next to GOL.
Right.
All we do is clear, consistent, and actionable. It will come to the council. I have want to just mention, University Drive came up to before town meeting and it was turned down. I will bet you this time it will go through.
Yeah.
So
I
there's an
think so.
example of a change that this town council has made. And it opens it up for much more development in an area that doesn't bother people as a neighborhood nearly as much as some of the other projects seem to have. The second thing is the university has just come out with their own RFP to hire a developer to help them look at the campus and see whether or not they can expand some housing on campus. They also recognize with that RFP that they have a whole group of dorms, the presidential complex mainly, which are the high-rise ones, that are basically out of date. And they're going to either have to replace them or do significant remodeling, which probably can't be done. So they're looking at their own housing. UMass Amherst, interestingly enough, houses more students percentage-wise on its campus than just about any other large university. And yet, because we're such a small town, we feel the impact of it. And we can't control whether or not John Q. Public comes in and buys the neighborhood, the house next door, and turns it into a rental. We can't control all of that. We can control it with our rental bylaw, which we also passed. And thank you very much, CRC. Pat was part of that. But there's certain things, we can't control the private market, the private housing market.
Are you
Somebody
saying
wants
you
to
can't-
bid up a house for 100,000 more than it's listed for. We can't control that.
But are you saying you can't control student rental permits to allow?
There's no difference between a student rental permit and a rental permit in Amherst.
So I guess that's what I'm
Fine
asking.
line between that and discrimination. You have to be very, very careful. You can create certain kinds of things, and we've looked very seriously at Penn State, our state college, because they've done that. But you have to be really careful. The same thing, I'll be straightforward with you. You might as well forget the fact that we have 4 unrelated individuals. If that ever went to court, it'd be thrown out. There's certain things you just can't do because it steps on people's rights. Kitty?
Okay, so I think okay, first of all, I would like people in our town, including myself, to forego using sloganeering, like and exaggerated memes, like people here just don't like change. I just don't think that's a fair summary of our population. And to say that people here don't want any change, I really hope that all of us will watch our language carefully so that we don't slip into a Trump era kind of way of speaking, very bullying, very accusatory. And I hope we can do better than that.
Kitty, I want to thank you for that. Having recently been blasted all over a sign as not supporting education, I can't tell you how wrong those people are. So
yeah,
it's
so
just the
like
way it is.
these summaries are just like tend to be unfair.
Yeah, it's also one of the reasons why people don't want to run for public office.
Yeah,
Is not a cakewalk.
And it's like, yeah. So I think that the current statistic is that there's 30 or 40% of our population does not live here year round because they are undergraduate students.
It's at least 40%.
Okay.
Going on 50.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that's a significant seasonal population. Do we agree on that?
We do. And when we tried to get people to recognize that our season is different than the Cape Cod season,
exactly,
Boston had deaf ears.
So what can we do about that? Because that was my question, is like, what are you doing enough to get us designated as a seasonal community, even though we're not like a warm weather seasonal community?
We work very hard with Joe Comerford, who works very hard for us, and with Mindy Dom, who also works very hard for us. And they are, again, they're very successful in many ways. They both have achieved nice positions. Joe is now vice chair of Ways and Means in the Senate. But they can just do so much.
What can our town do to support them in doing more than just so much?
Make sure they hear from you.
Okay. Can the town council spearhead a petition or a movement in the town? Can they take a leadership position on that?
I don't, what we try to do is get them to influence legislation, which is how we try to do things with them. We do meet with them once a month. And the broad topics are all over the place. Education is always at the top. We're still waiting for, Joe Comerford has indicated in various conversations that she will be filing some kind of bill to look at reform for funding education, because bluntly, the states failed us. They have absolutely failed us. More and more districts, all you have to do is read the Gazette. And every district around us is facing some of the very same issues. Our state money at this point from the state for education is a wash. As much as they're giving us, they're taking away. So education is now a local issue, whereas it's always been a state issue for Massachusetts.
So I mean, it seems like the town council could help the public, help the town council, help the state senator and representative.
No, you do. I mean, you let us know what you're thinking.
Okay.
We make sure we know that you're thinking that, and we make sure we share it with our state reps.
And is this in the era of the federal government difficulties with funding? Is it, I mean, should we be pushing for local? I mean,
pushing for what local?
Like to be designated as a seasonal town. I mean, how do these issues? Is it ridiculous to be thinking about the town when we should be maybe thinking about the federal government and
I don't want to get us started on
okay.
our own opinions of what could happen with the situation in Washington, but it's not going to be pretty.
Can I ask what's a seasonal town? I don't understand.
Seasonal.
And how would that differ from what we are now? That's just, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So for example, Cape Cod is seasonal. Okay. But their season's basically 3, maybe 4 months a year. We're seasonal, but we're 9 months a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's when your town explodes through a population influx. And the question is, how does that change what services you have to provide? How does that change your housing situation? How does it change any number of issues with regard to the place you live? So for example, we're seasonal in the winter. Cape Cod is seasonal. People come in, they stay for 2 weeks, they leave. That's their definition of seasonal. Our definition of seasonal is they come in for 9 months and they stay. They go to our schools, they use our roads, they use our parks, they use our trails, they take our EMS people. I mean, it's all there. Now, by the way, they pay for EMS and they pay for fire. Even on campus, they pay for those. So it's not like they pay for their own water, they pay for sewer. So they don't get a free ride from the town, meaning the higher ed institutions.
Lynn, could you explain what the seasonal designation does for a town?
Well, so for example, there's a variety of things that the Cape can do from a standpoint of its bylaws because it gets away with that seasonal definition. Our issues are not, they're different, and we don't have the same kind of flexibility with our bylaws. The ADU issue is one of them.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're kind of at the end of our meeting, but we want to make sure if you have other issues that you ask. We've covered the gambit of DPW, fire, the roundabouts on Heatherstone and the budgets.
When is College Street gonna get fixed?
Oh, geez. Good question. I mentioned earlier that I've asked for the roads. By the way, some of College Street, let's see. No, the part of College Street between Belchertown and the town center, the town owns that road. The part of Route 9, which is College Street, between the center of town and Hadley is owned by the state. Somewhere in the wisdom of some past phase of our government, we decided to take over Route 9, which we never should have done. As a result, we own it. That section of Route 9 between center of town and Belchertown. I don't have any better answer for you. And we all saw what happened when we went through the repair this last year. Did you have any other comment, Lee? We can't hear you.
Yes, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having this. I can't imagine having any two better town councilors than the two of you. I'm very grateful for all you do and for having this meeting. So thank you again. That's it.
Thank you. Jason, final comment?
Yeah, I'd like to, echo Lee's comments too. Do definitely appreciate you having these meetings and allowing everybody here to speak. I do want to come back to the zoning thing and just give my opinion and just say, I really think that we need to really look at some of the what I consider to be arbitrary zoning things. You mentioned University Drive. I know there's some commercial buildings there that have just those vast expanses of green, like grass. That's just lawn. It's useless. It's pointless. There's a lot of available space in town to be built on. Now, there's a lot of it's private property. There's potential private property, commercial property. It's not as if the town owns all of it. I don't think we have a housing problem. I think we have a zoning problem, and we have just this lack of incentives for businesses as well. And we talk a lot about zoning for housing, but just bringing businesses, what are we doing to incentivize business? And I say that not in an accusatory way, but more of a rhetorical way. What are we doing as a town to incentivize businesses to move in so that we can collect extra taxes from them and take some of the burden off of homeowners? And I just hope that those concerns are reflected in the future conversations about zoning in the town.
Could you let the little person there come in and wave at us? Because she's definitely interested. Hello, my friend.
I said no.
She's having her bedtime snack.
Kitty, did you have some final words?
Yes, besides thank you. And I'm just wondering if there's been more conversation about the use of the Wildwood School, and I hope that the town does not sell off a really wonderful piece of real estate like the Wildwood School. And I don't know if you have a comment about that.
The only thing we can tell you is right now we don't own it. We have to wait for the schools to decide to give it to us.
Okay. And the other thing is I hope that the charter review process will be a meaningful one. And that it won't be stalled in like figuring out process until the time limit is up.
That's sort of up to the charter committee. It'd be nice if they got really going.
It's a good committee, but they can extend their timeline.
Okay.
Okay.
And I hope they can extend their discussion to include things that are not necessarily in their mission statement or whatever it's called in their purview, because there are important issues to be discussed.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that you're right on, Kitty, there may be things that they can't change without bringing it forward to vote, a special act and da. But discussing it is a critical aspect of it. I've talked a lot to Dan Muscat about that, and I think it's pretty important.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Okay.
This was a
Thank
great.
you.
Neighbors, I got some of the best neighbors.
Nice to see
May-
you, Liz.
re-
Nice to see all you.
I think he has a hand up,
Yes,
Mr.
yeah.
Yeah.
McLean.
Yes, we do.
A different McLean.
Oh,
Sorry. Hi, I'm Meg.
Hi, Meg.
I was trying to listen to a lot of it too. And I appreciate I was doing kid and dinner things as I was
Great.
listening in. I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to put one last idea out there of just considering in the budgeting process, the sort of this bridge year between when we have the 3 elementary schools and then transitioning to the 2 and how we might be creative about trying to sort of lessen, sort of make that transition happen in a smooth.
We've asked
Yeah.
the superintendent and the school committee
I
to give us a
appreciate it.
plan for that so that we can know what it would cost to get to that bridge.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We're waiting for the plan.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Good night, all.
Good night. Take
everybody.
care.
Stay safe out there.
Andy, thank you. I thought you were
Andy.
gonna talk more about the budget, but
It's never a time.
Thanks.
see you later.
Bye.
Liz,